Hello and welcome to Runkle of the Bailey. My name is Ian Runkle. I'm a Canadian criminal defense and firearms lawyer. Today I want to talk about a story, and the one I'm looking at was reported in the Edmonton Journal. The headline is, "Filming of The Last of Us Shut Down When Gunman Appeared in Window, Calgary Court Hears." I'm going to link the full article in the description below. It's an article by Kevin Martin, whose work is usually excellent, so check that out. You can see some more details there. But basically what was going on is The Last of Us, which is a TV show based on a popular video game, was being filmed here in Alberta. And somebody decided they wanted to get a better look. They had a vantage over this from where they were living, and they decided, I want to see this a little bit better. So they pulled out an airsoft gun, which in this case is a sort of AR patterned airsoft gun, and they decided to look through the scope. So something along the lines of, and this is also an airsoft gun, and they're just, having a look through the scope, which is a real bad idea. Scopes are not good to use as a visual aid because, of course, the scope is typically attached to the rest of this thing, and this thing tends to make people nervous. Hunters sometimes do this, and it is actually likely a criminal offense when they do. So don't do that. At any rate, because this was seen, it scared people, it shut down filming, and because they had to shut down filming, it ended up costing over $50,000 in terms of lost salary and so forth, because delays on a film set are incredibly expensive. So that's what's at issue. Now, he faces a number of charges. As reported, 3 counts of mischief, unlawful use of an imitation firearm to commit mischief, and possession of a weapon for purposes dangerous to the public peace. All of which I find a little interesting because they didn't charge any firearm charges, and they could have. And the reason why I say they could have is that airsoft guns in Canada are typically, most of them will be classified as firearms, although not firearms that you need a license for. And in particular, we do have some evidence at this trial, that some evidence was called at this particular trial that would establish this as likely a firearm. And I'm just going to quote here from the article. It was firearms expert Constable Stefan Ciccione, I think, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right, said the gun could cause serious harm if a projectile struck someone in the eye. That's basically the test. This is basically establishing that this may be actually a firearm in Canadian law, which might have allowed them to lay charges like pointing a firearm, careless use of a firearm, etc. But that doesn't appear to be the case. Instead, they seem to be relying primarily on the mischief charges. So let's talk about mischief, because it's kind of widely misunderstood. So mischief is often used for situations of like damage to property. If somebody keys your car, that's a mischief. If somebody smashes your mailbox, that's a mischief. But it's actually a very broad charge. It says mischief, everyone commits mischief who willfully A, destroys or damages property, B, renders property dangerous, useless, inoperative, or ineffective, C, obstructs, interrupts, or interferes with the lawful use, enjoyment, or operation of property, or D, obstructs, interrupts, or interferes with any person in the lawful use, enjoyment, or operation of property. So that seems to cover it here, right? This is very broad. You can commit mischief in all sorts of ways. For instance, if I stand in the doorway of your store and prevent people from entering, that can be a mischief. Now, the punishment on this, where the value exceeds $5,000, has a maximum sentence of 10 years. And where we're talking about the firearm aspect, that would add a potential maximum of 14 years. Now, I don't see this kid getting that much time. I say kid, I'm not sure exactly how old this person is, but regardless, this one is a bit of an unusual circumstance, and there's going to be some dispute, like whether or not there was actually whether or not there was sufficient intent to make this out. And in particular, the accused in this one, Mr. Wadden, apparently he's 19 years old, so I guess kid is not entirely inappropriate, although he is legally an adult in terms of facing these charges. He says he was pointing the gun at his windowsill as opposed to actually at the crew and so forth. So, and I can kind of see how you might do that. Again, if you've got this rifle, you could just sort of wedge the barrel up into the windowsill and then look through and, have a look through that. My first thought at that was, how would they have seen that this looks like a firearm? But I mean, they might have been able to see enough of sort of the back end to make that determination without necessarily being able to see the barrel. At a distance, the barrel would be hard to see. Now, all of this really, gets to the issue of a scope should never be used as a way to look at something that you haven't really already identified. If you're out hunting, you don't want to raise your rifle if you think something might be a brown thing, because it might be a guy wearing a brown jacket, and you don't want to be sitting there saying hi when you're looking at them like this, right? So when I go hunting, I bring a set of binoculars, and if I don't know what I'm looking at, you use the binoculars, and then once you've identified it, then maybe you're lifting the rifle if it's something that you think is, something you want to shoot. That's just basic common sense. And one of the things that just is really obvious here, people have said, why doesn't he use the binoculars? Why doesn't he anything else? If nothing else, the scope comes off. I mean, sure, it's a pain in the butt to do. You might have to, I'd say you'd have to sight it back in, but we're talking about an airsoft rifle. They're not super accurate. You're not getting, you're not looking at like tiny 1-inch differences on an airsoft gun, because the gun itself isn't that accurate. But, nobody's going to be as upset if they see you looking down the scope of just a disconnected scope. This is really a situation of somebody being stupid. And I think that one of the problems here is that this is a case that really does poorly with the criminal justice system, because as much as this is a stupid thing and it's had some consequences in terms of these damages, putting this guy in jail isn't going to solve the problem for this film crew. And I don't know that we really need to hammer this particular guy. It does appear that he's screwed up, and that I'm not at all in approval of this situation. But it seems to me that, any sort of jail sentence is probably not called for. Really, what I'd think would be an appropriate kind of sentence here might be a term of probation with conditions to include not to have airsoft guns during that time. Because, you pull something like that, you get to take a break. That just makes sense to me. They might impose a firearm prohibition here, which would ban him from using many airsoft guns, but not all airsoft guns. Some airsoft guns are not legally considered firearms, although typically the higher quality ones will be. So that is another sort of option here, but I don't really see that jail is called for. Ultimately, they may disagree. And I'm just going to sort of note here some other aspects here. So there's a picture that was included here, and I'm going to just comment on it because there's not really any other way to do this. This is a pose here where they've got everybody posing with these 2 airsoft rifles that they've seen, or airsoft guns rather, 1 airsoft rifle, 1 airsoft handgun. And first thing, if you're trying to convey to the public about just how dangerous an item is and how it could cause serious bodily harm if you're shot with it. In fact, the guy at the leftmost is the guy who testified as to that. Well, then maybe you don't want to have a picture taken where the item that you're testifying in court can cause serious bodily injury is pointed directly at your testicles. Just sort of a practice tip. That's not really considered best practice. Second, I'm really not a fan of this, sort of posing here, because this is clearly the guy who is second from the left there, with the sort of, I'm not sure how to describe that pose, but that guy, that's the Crown Prosecutor. And I don't know if that is really my favorite thing right here. But anyway, they're doing a pose to show the dangerous toys they've taken off the street. And yeah, ultimately this one feels like it might be better settled with the civil process, in the sense of if you really want to convince people that this is a bad idea, him paying the actual costs of the fallout on this one, that's not a small bill. That's not a small bill. That's something he'd be paying off for quite a while, especially at the age of 19. Um, that'll be something that they'd be pursuing and taking money off his paychecks for quite some time. I feel like that would be a pretty strong deterrent and might satisfy all of the requirements here. Ultimately, this one is still at trial. They're at the stage apparently of hearing sort of final arguments. That's probably actually happening this morning, so we'll probably see an update. But yeah. Anyway, this one is kind of an interesting story. I'm going to see about following up. I'm hoping there's going to be a written decision so that we can see what all is determined at the end of the day, because there could be arguments either way in terms of conviction, and certainly arguments as to sentence if a conviction results. So I've only had like 1,000 people asking me about this one. I exaggerate, of course, but so I thought I would try to get a video out fairly quickly just to explain what this one's about and give some thoughts. Hopefully later tonight I'll be doing a live stream and we may have some more updates, so I'll hopefully try to be able to follow up on that a little further. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you found this to be interesting or educational. Please like this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to see more content. I also want to thank my Patreon supporters at the $50 level, the CCFR, David Michaud, Canada's National Firearms Association, and the Canadian Shooting Sports Association. At the $30 level, Sights and Arms Limited and Jane Babe and Luxor. And at the $20 level, Lindsay Metcalf, Kyle Fox, Haywire, Gerald to the Bailey, Cameron Johnson, Andrew Elsich, and Vicky. Thank you as well to my $10 supporters who will be in the crawl immediately following. I guess a last thought here. Right now, because Airsoft is fairly unregulated, there are no sort of safety courses that are required. I don't know if requiring a safety course is necessarily the best sort of way to go, but certainly even if you are not required to take a safety course, Airsoft enthusiasts should be mindful of safety and should be mindful of the laws and so forth, because in many circumstances, they can face pretty serious jeopardy if they screw this up. This is a potentially big deal. And Airsoft, as much as, it's a recreational item. It's not, really intended for use as a weapon. They do qualify as weapons in the law. There's a criteria there for, one of the charges is possession of a weapon for purposes dangerous to the public peace. That can likely be made out in these circumstances. I say likely, but again, we'll have to see how that shakes out. I haven't watched the trial, but there is all this potential for liability, potential for injuries. I've done previous videos talking about how cheating in an Airsoft game could potentially put you at risk for serious criminal penalties if a prosecutor decided to pursue that. I think that this is really good information. Maybe I should do just a basic sort of safety briefing, safety lecture for Airsofters. And then I can put that up and maybe somebody will watch it and maybe it'll be useful. I can't say, but I guess it's not a bad idea. Anyway, thank you guys for watching. I hope this one has helped you out. See you next time.